Hello.
Hello, Dr. Lamb.
Hey, Rosie, how are you?
Hello.
Hello. Can y'all hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
sir.
Yes.
Y'all can hear Rosie. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Let me share my screen and get started. Okay. How's everybody's week going?
It's been the longest week so far, to be
Yeah,
honest.
it's been that way at work. I don't know. It's the doldrums of winter.
Yeah.
What I always used to say was, you know, you hire new teachers during the summer and they're so excited, especially the beginning. And the ones that weren't going to make it already had the sniffles before Thanksgiving, crying, figuring out they'd made a bad life decision. And
Yep.
and by the middle or the end of February, we were all crying.
Yep.
We were all thinking we'd made a bad life decision.
I still think that every morning. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
No, if you don't, I mean, you have to, sometimes you have to do a reflection like that and reaffirm and you know, your commitment to what you're doing. But I tell you, when I was principal in Western County, we had a snow the Sunday before we were supposed to come back after the holidays. I guess it was like January 2nd or 3rd. We had a snow. And we didn't go back to school for 2 weeks. It was one of those generational snows about, I don't know, I'm pretty tall and it was waist deep on me. And we shoveled and shoveled, and I was principal of a school that had all outside breezeways, didn't have any interior hallways. And so you couldn't get a tractor, and the district didn't own a snow blower kind of thing. So we had to shovel out in front of the rooms. We were out of school for 2 weeks trying to get all that. Even when it was weekend before we were to come back, we still had snow drifts up against we had to get over there that weekend and shovel all that out. But I said that to say this: we lost our Easter break and every one of our work days for the rest of the school year until June. I still remember that as being the longest 2 years. That 4 months is the longest 2 years of my life. I didn't think we were ever going to get through that. Not one day off, not one Friday, not one work day, no Easter, no spring break, no nothing. We just went straight through the rest. Now,
Did you ever think of quitting?
If that won't test your resolve, nothing will. I can tell you. And we had a couple of more snow days, and we had a really tough winter, but no days off. Every day, grind it out. We had to do some Saturdays. When we had more snow days, we had to do Saturdays. 2 weeks took our Easter week and all the work days, and then the other 2 days we had to go 2 or 3 Saturdays, 3 or 4. Oh, it was brutal. People were suicidal. It was not good. All right, let me see who we got. That's not the view I wanted. Hello, Dr. Tobias and Dr. Massengill. How are y'all tonight? Let's see if
I am good.
I'm gonna stop.
Doing well, sir. Hope you are.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. I've been in a lot of meetings lately, but I went to one today. I didn't make it but about 5 minutes, and I had to leave. I was afraid I was going to snap and hurt somebody. I just had to get up and leave about 5 minutes in. So you can tell I don't need to be in the school business any longer. I don't have the patience for. I don't suffer fools well anymore. So 5 minutes into a 1 hour meeting, I just had to get up and leave. I was an old man, small bladder. Just got up and left. It was either that or hurt somebody, so I let it go. All right. Welcome again back to Mels 603 for the spring 2020 session. Tonight is our 5th week. So next week, I'm so excited. Y'all get to be in charge next week. I hope everybody's had their groups get together and start working on your cases. Remember, next week is your first case study. Will Bobby strike out? And when we come on next week, I'll simply do our weekly update off of our weekly schedule like I'm doing now. And maybe tell 1 or 2 more nonsensical things. And then I'm going to turn it over to y'all. And then you're going to present, and I will do a screen share. And then somebody will need to have it loaded on their computer. So when I share my screen with you, you'll be in charge, and everybody will see your screen. And your group will take turns, and you will work through your presentations. And hopefully we'll get through in a reasonable amount of time. It might take a little extra, but I'll try not to talk too much. But I'm really looking forward to that, to your input.
Yeah, she 172. I didn't even think that.
All right, so that's coming up next week. So this week we're going to start our discipline module, due process, discipline. So last week we finished up our emergency plans and crisis, our safety section. Then we did liability, which goes with safety, because the majority of the things that you will get into liability issues over is your inaction or wrong action or malicious action in terms of school safety things. That's why between safety and discipline, it kind of brackets those. You get in trouble over, kid getting hurt, negligence, malfeasance, nonfeasance, misfeasance. You didn't do anything, you didn't do the right thing, you maliciously did the wrong thing. And that's usually around school safety things, not doing your fire drills, not doing your safety drills, not doing your safety inspections, having broken equipment you didn't do walkthroughs, you had a broken lock on a door, kids were able to get in the room and get to chemicals or something like that. You had a broken piece of equipment on the playground. You didn't have you didn't monitor the bus lot, and some kid ran out in front of a car or a bus, or those kinds of things. That's where you usually get hit with negligence lawsuits. Either that or something to do with discipline. And so that's why I sandwiched that week in between our safety module and our discipline module. So to kind of summarize on the field trip, and you get rear-ended in a bus on a field trip, the reason I use that one, everybody kind of has it buttoned down or should have things buttoned down about what happens on campus. Seems like where we always get in trouble is when things happen off campus and everybody's standing around looking at one another and not knowing what to do. That's kind of the litmus test. Do you know what to do, and do the rules extend to off campus? When you leave campus, do you lose your mind? Does it stay back at work? Can you still put everything in place that you have at school in a remote location, like on a field trip, you get hit by a bus again? Call 911 immediately. Don't talk to the press. Don't talk to parents. Somebody in their response this week made a really good point. Be careful what you say on your own cell phone when you're calling people, because people are trying to eavesdrop on your conversations. That's a really good point. I like that. And so that leads us into tonight. Observe student due process in your school and report. The thing that I want you to see is it's long and involved. It's not just a quick swat them on the behind and send them on back to class like it used to be in my day when I was in school. It's no, now you need to do due process. You need to ask, tell the kids what they're charged with. You get witness statements. You take their statements. It's a best practice to do written statements. Somebody said, well, if they're not old enough, you get a witness and you try and transcribe what they tell you. And what I want you to see is it's not nearly as fast and as easy as you'd like it to be. You've got to consult with your handbook to see what your range of consequences are, so you don't get hit with arbitrary or capricious, which is one of the things the standards of our case study next week's about. Arbitrary is when you do, two kids get caught doing the same thing. Me and Dr. Massengill are out back smoking, and you catch us both, you bring us in, you send him back to class, and you just take me out back and shoot me. That's arbitrary. You punish one and not the other. Or capricious, you shot me. The handbook said all you could do was give me a day of in-school suspension, and you shot me. That would be capricious. You gave me more than the handbook called for. So everybody you know has a code of conduct. I have that queued up for us already. Here it is. And in your district's code of conduct, which is in your students' rights and responsibilities handbook, or student conduct handbook, or student handbook, it's going to have like the tiers in terms of the level of consequences, but more specifically, it's going to have these violations of the code of conduct as defined by the state manual, which we will go to next, defines what the categories of infractions are. The state says this is a violation of the code of conduct. Now, the state does not prescribe punishment or consequences. They list them as what they could be, but they do not link them together. We're going to look at that manual in just a minute. What the state says is, this is an infraction. These are the range of consequences. Local boards now must adopt a code of conduct policy that matches the infraction with the punishment. And it can neither be arbitrary nor capricious. It can't be more than a reasonable person would say would be a reasonable thing to do. For example, again, shooting somebody is not reasonable punishment for smoking. And so the state does not prescribe punishment. That's left up to local boards of education to adopt. Now, you know as well as I do, there's a committee or a group, usually headed up by your assistant general or associate general counsel, that leads the development of your code of conduct for your district. They give it to them, the school board members, some of them look at it and maybe offer suggestions, and some don't. But the board has to adopt it. They have to vote on it. It's not something that the principal says, I think it ought to be this or that. No. It's the school board. It's that governance. Federal law, state law, but local board policy. That's the state law says these are the infractions. Local board policy says this is the punishment. Your job to carry that out. And so you can't just sit and say, well, I think it ought to be this, or I want to do that, or, this kid's been a pain in my side the whole year long, kind of like Bobby is in our first case study. And the teacher says, this kid's been a pain in my behind all year long. I'm going to give him this much punishment for this infraction. His infraction was he cheated on a class assignment. I'm going to say that assignment counted more than 50% of his grade. I'm going to exclude him, a zero tolerance suspension. I'm going to exclude him for a whole year. Does the punishment fit the crime? Or is it capricious? Is it arbitrary? We don't know. Did she do this to everybody that got caught with Bobby? We don't know that part. So we're looking at the standard of capricious in next week's case study. We're looking at the standard of capricious. Does excluding a kid from school for an entire year, is that a realistic or an appropriate punishment for a kid who cheated on a class assignment? That's where we are. So the state defines what the infractions are. The local board policy puts the consequences with the infraction. The state also defines what the consequences, the range is. This is what you can do. Now, it doesn't match, again, it doesn't match the two. That's left up to the local board. So don't say, well, the state manual says I'm supposed to. No, it doesn't say you're supposed to do anything. State manual says this is an infraction, this is a consequence. Local board, now you determine what each of these get, the matrix. And so this is one here, and it gives a minimum and maximum, level 1, level 2, and each of the things that this district punishes has a minimum and maximum response. Now, some districts go even further where they do a matrix for administrator that says it's appropriate to give the minimum if, or if it's appropriate to give the maximum if. Those are just guidelines. But the actual system is a minimum or a maximum. And so you can go anywhere in between. You shouldn't give less, you shouldn't give more. Now, that portends the notion of arbitrary. And you could say, well, we caught Dale and Dr. Massengill smoking. We're going to give Dr. Massengill the minimum punishment. We're going to give Dale the maximum punishment. And then, so then comes the question, is that arbitrary? So what if somebody said, well, we gave Dale this punishment because this is a chronic problem with him. And this is Dr. Massengill's first time. That one gets debated in court all the time. And the general rule of thumb, now you know anybody can sue you anytime for anything, and you never know if you're going to win or lose. There's certain things. The general rule of thumb when you go to court over something like that is you can't bring prior incidents into play unless there's a pattern and it's sexual in nature. Those are allowable in court. That your pattern of behavior, sexual misbehavior, they will let you bring priors in on sexual things, but general behavior issues, generally the courts frown upon you saying, bringing all the priors in. It's just like when a criminal goes to court and he's charged with breaking and entering. They're not supposed to bring his prior infractions in. Sometimes they'll allow them if they're the same kinds of things, but if he did something else, they won't let the jury hear that. It's kind of the same thing. I see I've got a question. I want to get to it, and then I want to get to Dr. Massengill. Do I think that there should be infraction for alternative schools? We still tend to follow the code of conduct. I've spoken for there should be most districts have, and I did for Charlotte-Mecklenburg, I can tell you. We did adopt a different code of conduct and got the board to approve it for alternative schools in Charlotte-Mecklenburg. Absolutely, there should be a different standard in an alternative school. You don't have the same range of consequences in an alternative school. And so you have to develop an alternative code for there. One of the things you have to be careful of is kids would love to be suspended from an alternative school. That's kind of an IQ test for the people that work there. So again, you've got to develop a different one for them. If you don't, it really won't work. And you don't want to make your own up and then somebody sue you because it's not the one the board adopted. You need to write one for alternative schools and have the board. Dr. Massengill, I want to get to you, then I want to get to Dr. Tobias about y'all are in two kind of different districts. I want to get to y'all about what your district says about bringing priors in when you give disciplinary consequences. Dr. Massengill?
In our district, the language is pretty explicit that there has to be a pattern of behavior to even bring it into an appeals hearing if there's something going on with long-term suspension or a recommendation for an alternative school. We typically, particularly at the district level, as the conversations with equity continue, we have not been allowed to use prior behaviors unless they're violent behaviors, assault, harassment, bullying, things that would be closer to no tolerance.
Acts of crime and violence.
Yeah, reportable offenses. So if
There you go.
reportable
That's it.
offenses are in play, then we're allowed to bring those in
Right.
to student safety. But otherwise, no, for low level behaviors.
That was the rule of thumb. That wasn't a rule of thumb. That was our policy in CMS. And I was instrumental in that because of issues of equity and the disproportionate amount of suspension among different subgroups that we would not allow unless it was an act of crime and violence. And let me get to that one for you right quick. I've got that one queued. Here we go, right here. Here are the acts of crime and violence. Robbery involving use of a weapon, homicide, assault resulting in serious personal injury, assault with weapon, kidnapping, sexual assault, sexual offense, rape, taking indecent liberties with a minor, sexual harassment, harassment or bullying based on race, color, national order, or origin, or harassment or bullying based on disability. Unless it was one of those things and it was a pattern, we would not allow administrators to bring anything else in when they gave punishment for fear that they would give too much or it would become arbitrary. So that was the rules right there. This is it. These things could be factored into a prior incidents of these could be factored into a disciplinary decision at the school level or at the district level, but nothing else, with an eye to equity. Dr. Tobias, if you'd like to join us.
In our system, we are very cautious not to hold things against people or discipline, except for things of violence, unless you've been like suspended or removed from the school or the district, which is rare. Discipline in our system is very cautious now. Word equity that you just threw around. I'm in a predominantly minority district, so we have a tendency to be very cautious about what you hold against people. I think personally, it's just prudent behavior to me. I always tell my students, you start over. You can't hold things against people like that, unless it's just a pattern of somebody that you know has a problem.
If it's violent behavior, that's a different story. That's a public safety issue. But other than that, and that's why I said, even if in terms of the district, if we knew that we were going to have to go to court on one, we would not allow anything but sexual behavior, where we were showing a pattern of being a sexual predator. We were careful to not even do some of the other things, but schools could only use these when they were making a decision. Again, majority minority district, largest in the state, issues of equity are there. And you always got to understand any decision you make, you may end up in court trying to defend it. And you don't want to be on the wrong side of history. That's not good for careers. So so what you have to understand as an assistant principal, when you go and watch one of them work and do a due process, they've got to follow the steps, allow the kid to, know what he's charged with. He responds to the charges, get written statements. He can give names of his witnesses. You get witnesses. You have to get all that stuff. But then you have to go to the code of conduct. You can't say, well, I think he ought to get this, or I think he ought to get that. You've got to make sure, and you've got to be careful not to bring in, well, you're in my office every week, that kind of stuff. So it takes a while. It's time consuming. And then the second thing that we're asking you to do this week, excuse me, is to interview an AP about their concerns about processing discipline. And I think what you will find, I don't want to kind of influence this, but I think what you will find, they'll have two concerns. One, how long it takes, but more importantly, most APs, their concern is about getting it right. It's about it being restorative justice. That you don't just punish kids. You can't punish your way to better behavior. They want to do something that's in the vein of restorative justice. How can I do something that helps this child not to keep perpetrating this same behavior? That's generally what you're going to see. So I said that to say this. When we give students consequences for their behavior, we're not doing it just for the joy of punishing them. We're doing it in the restorative justice sense that we're trying to get them to stop that behavior and change their behavior to something else. And that's part of the discipline matrix or code of conduct as well. What can we do that will get their attention and get them to try to change or be something that could be a positive in their life to change and amend their behaviors? So I'm going to be interested to read about you going out and watching a discipline incident, getting processed, and also talking with your AP about their concerns. I think that's going to be an eye-opener for us all. And so those are the things. Again, next week, we're on for case study 1. All right, so for tonight, I'm going to answer some questions, and then I'm going to move into the bulk of our information tonight.
Dr. Lamb, there's a question about restorative justice.
Yeah.
I would suggest that a lot of people really hone into that. That's up and coming and the way to go, that a lot of systems are going to really depend on that because of lawsuits and having great due process for kids, just doing discipline, that people really learn about restorative justice because it's going to be the thing of the future.
It is. So if you'll go to Bulldog 1, that's under the library tab in Blackboard where our class is. And what you will, when you do that, you will see a lot of articles and some books on restorative. Now these aren't Google. This isn't Google. This isn't fake news. This is journal referees and articles, professional reference. And so I'm looking for one particular one. And so here are the top 10. And so
Dr. Lamb, while you're finding that, I'll add to Dr. Tobias's comments. I was skeptical for restorative justice practices based on what I had been told until I found a school that did it really well and went and saw their practices in actual practice. And I was sold immediately. They're that powerful, whether you're restorative circles or whatever you're doing. And really all it's letting kids do is have conversations with trusted adults and with each other about the issues that they're facing and to work them out. I mean, from a life skills perspective, it's what the adults in our building should be doing, much less the kids.
Mm-hmm. And so this is the one. This one is more of a this one is more of a theoretical, and this one is for schools. And this would be, you need to read this one, The Effects of Race on Restorative Justice, and you need to read the one from schools. Let's see. This Zernova, that's a good one. Oh, this one right here. Theo's book, let's see. Right here, Restorative Justice in Schools, The Influence of Race on Restorative Justice. This is a seminal work right here. This would be the one that I would start with. Now, if you don't know anything about restorative justice, the one right underneath it, again, Zernova, this is where you will read all about how the actual concepts, whether it's in criminal justice, whether this is the conceptual book right here. And then this is about in school, and especially the influence of race in restorative justice. These are the two right here that I would recommend. And so that's the newest, latest, greatest on the horizon thing in student discipline is running it through the lens of restorative justice, that we can't just be assigning consequences for retribution's sake. It's got to be more in stopping recidivism. It's got to be more about re-educating kids, doing things, consequences that lead them to do better in school and better. It can't just be punitive. It can't be all stick and no carrot. I don't know very many things about school, but I know that you can neither punish nor reward one way or the other in totality your way to better behavior in school. If all you do is punish kids, that's not going to work if all you do is reward kids. And for some reason, people think that restorative justice is about always just rewarding them and not punishing them. That is not the case. But you can't just run schools like a prison where everything's a punishment base. Nor can you do Renaissance programs all the time where all you do is reward kids. That won't work either. I remember my favorite story about trying to reward. I took over a middle school in the western part of the state. And pretty much the reason why I was there is it was back in the time when we were looking to start school accountability, and everybody had whispered around, well, you know, kids can't be out of school. We've got to stop sending kids home, and we need to start doing all of these reward programs. We were still doing the California achievement test at the time, but we were getting ready to start state testing. This was in the mid-'80s. Again, 83 basic ed plan passed. 83 to 89 implement the standard course of study. And then starting in 89, we started performance-based accountability. And so this was like 86, 7. We were getting ready for that, and we were already being prepped for, you're not just going to be able to send kids home all the time. That can't be your only disciplinary consequences, just send kids home all the time. Every kid's going to have to be tested. And so a lot of schools kind of went the other way, where they said, well, what we'll do is we'll just start rewarding kids. And so I never will forget, I took over a middle school that was kind of out of control. And I don't know, I hadn't been there but about 2 weeks, and I had to take a kid home. I suspended a kid and called his parents, and they couldn't come get him, so I took him home. And he didn't live but about 3 blocks from the school, and they didn't have a vehicle. He walked to school. They lived in a mobile home park, and there on the side of his parents' mobile home was my kid is a great kid or whatever at New Hope Middle School. Out, what was that program we used to have? That we ran. I think the Kiwanis. The great kid program, or my kid is a great kid or whatever. But the way they'd set it up was it rotated. Every kid in the room had to get it one time before the next kid got it. And my kid is an excellent kid or whatever that program was. But it was an attempt to just reward your way to better behavior. I never will forget that, and that was a true epiphany moment for me, that this is ridiculous. This is just as bad as punishing everybody for everything. This notion that we shouldn't punish them for anything, and that every kid has to get, the prize and the award for good behavior before anybody else can get it. And 30 weeks into the school year, we've run out of kids to give it to before we can do it. So everybody in the room gets it, no matter what their behavior is. That long-winded story is to say, all one way or the other doesn't work. You have to find a solution. Restorative justice has you seek different kinds of solutions that are not always just punishment based. And so that would be where I would look again, the library tab in Blackboard, and use Bulldog 1, type in restorative justice. It's a good question, Jeanette. All right. Okay. All right, this is your Bible for an assistant principal. This is it on discipline. This is last year's. There's one 1920. I just pulled this one up. This is your disciplinary data reporting procedures. You are going to have to feed the monster. Every time a kid is referred to the office, I don't care what they did. I do not care. You're going to have to document that and put it into PowerSchool. It's there, according to the state reporting guide, there is no major, there is no minor. I know there are schools around the states who say, we only put the major things in until you get caught and lose your job. The state manual says you will put all discipline infractions in, ALL, all. And there are requirements, what must be reported to law enforcement to boot. What must be reported, all these things, everything that happens in school, using to record all incidents. Now, some districts have not adopted that and said, we will only go by the letter of the law and do exactly all. But if you look at everything that's required to be reported, there's really nothing that's not required to be reported to the state. Now, the state does not prescribe what discipline you have to give to them. So that's the next thing I hear is, well, I didn't suspend that kid, so I didn't have to report it. That's not true either. You have to report it if all you did was a conference with the student. You gave them no punishment whatsoever. You just conference with them. That's one of the options for consequences. So let me go back to the handbook here, and this is included in the handbook. And it has some really good stuff. Public instruction is responsible for creating procedures for complying with the State Board of Education and the North Carolina General Assembly. They have all of these rules and infractions. DPI is like their central office. They have to create a manual that says, all right, here's all the law, here's all the policies from the State Board and all the laws from the General Assembly. This is what they mean. And so right here, it tells you all these things. In aggregate, it's public information, and it allows the DPI to fulfill its data reporting obligations in the areas of school crime, suspension, expulsions, alternative. Also, since 2014, DPI is responsible to make all Office of Civil Rights reports. When I was in charge of this for CMS, when I was the person, me and as the deputy or assistant and the superintendent signed this, and I've got an old copy somewhere from 2011, I had to do separate Office of Civil Rights reporting. Now, why I said all has to go in this, because now the state does the OCR, Office of Civil Rights reporting, out of your PowerSchool disciplinary data. So everything has to go now. We used to keep it all because we were under court order for our bad behavior, and so we had to report the OCR on our own back in the day in Charlotte, Mecklenburg. But now DPI does the reporting to the Office of Civil Rights. They got to have it all in there because they want that. Office of Civil Rights wants to know how many infractions you have. Not crime and violence. They want to know how many infractions, period, of any kind. That's the first thing OCR. I know. I've filled the report out too many times. OCR wants to know how many infractions you have. That's where they start. The only way that you can do that, capture that data, is everything goes into Power School. When I say everything that gets a referral for a kid goes into Power School. You say, but PBIS, but PBIS nothing. If there's a referral on a kid, it's got to go in Power School. Otherwise, Office of Civil Rights will show up on your doorstep, and you will have had a really bad day when that happens. And so all of these things, and it tells you how it's used. And so here's the most important part of what I'll cover tonight. Disciplinary data reporting is organized around incidents. What happened? That's what you report. Not, well, we didn't suspend anybody. Suspension is an outcome. It's not an incident. We report incidents. Well, I didn't report it because I didn't know who did it. That's a separate screen. There's 3 screens. The perpetrator screen is a separate screen. Just because you don't know who did it doesn't mean I'm dead if somebody shot me at your school. We report incidents, period. Even if the offender is unknown. We report what happened. And then I have people say, well, that wasn't a student who did it. Doesn't matter. Another one of the screens, when you get to the offender, student, non-student, faculty member, doesn't matter. The incident happened at your school. That's what the state wants to know. I had a high school principal who argued a kid, truly tragic story, at East Mecklenburg. Bell rang at 2:15. He went out, got in his car. He sat there till about 2:30, pulled out a gun and shot and killed himself. The principal wanted to argue that he shouldn't have to report that because it was after the bell rang. As if it had been, as if the bell hadn't rang, he'd still be alive, I guess. No, it happened at your building. And then I've had people who come up with scenarios. The police are chasing a perpetrator down the street. He's in the car and he runs up into your parking lot and he crashes. Do I have to report that? Ha, ha, ha. Yes, you do. It happened on your campus. There's no but. There's no back door on this. There's no there is no gimmick. There's no catch. Everything that happens at your school must be reported. Period. Now, if you choose not to, that's on you. Or if your principal says, Lord, we can't tell everything, parents would be in revolt, that's on them until you get caught. It's like everything. It's all fun and games until you get caught. Or somebody gets their eye put out. And then you're going to lose your job because it tells you clearly. Regardless of who enters the data in, the principal is responsible. And not only will they get you that entered it in, they'll get the principal as well. And so I want to make sure we all understand that we're on the same page when we start here. I don't care how you do it in your district. I don't care if you put some program like PBIS in to cut down. When you get caught not reporting what the state said to report, then you have to use Power School. If you keep a different system like the old Swiss system or something like that, those are called third party. They do not integrate into Power School. You have to use Power School. Now, and it says right here, now the question is who has to do it? I'll tell you that in just 1 second. Let's see. All right. Because the state defines that for us. Okay. Even if the offender is unknown, here's the here's the acts of crime and violence that I read to you. U.S. Department of Education is interested in new data collection. So that's, Office of Civil Rights in 2014 took over the responsibility for the Office of Civil Rights reporting that was previously done by the LEAs. I used to have to do that. And so when that happened, oh my goodness, that's why I said now it's all ALL, because they want everything. everything. Office of Civil Rights, you have to tell them everything. Expulsion under zero tolerance policies. And so zero tolerance is illegal. That's what happens to Bobby. If you look right here, expulsion, what must be reported, all of this stuff, great day, everything. All right, what must be reported, procedures. All right, this is what the state says. This is the question that came in. Each school should have at least one person responsible for documenting disciplinary acts and consequences, the discipline data coordinator for the purpose of this discussion. That person has to be, usually it's an assistant principal. It used to even actually say usually it's an AP. The coordinator may not be the same person who puts it in, but the coordinator is responsible for data accuracy. Regardless who determines the data to enter to put it in, the principal is ultimately responsible. It's a class 1 misdemeanor if you don't do it. So usually the discipline data coordinator is one of the APs. It is not a good idea for it to be your data manager, because sometimes you're called upon to make decisions in terms of what to classify incidents as. Charlotte Mecklenburg, it had to be an AP. That was our hard and fast rule. One of your APs has got to be the one responsible. Can't be your data manager. They don't know the rules. You know, when we had to let some people go at one of the middle schools out near the university, because what they claimed is, well, it was the data manager that was putting it in the system wrong. No. Then the problem is you made the wrong decision letting her put it in. She classified anything that happened on the bus as bus misbehavior. Let me say that again. It didn't matter what it was. If it happened on a bus, according to her, it was bus misbehavior. And it took the parents going to the news media to discover that 12 rapes had occurred on the school bus, not counting some other bad things. That data manager was just happened on a bus misbehavior. Bus referral went in as bus misbehavior. Didn't matter what it was. Now, the school knew that. That was part of the gag. They were keeping the numbers down that way. No. You know, one of the high schools, we had a real serious incident on campus, and they all got together from the principal through the 3 APs. One of them, we just moved him because he was out. But all the way down to the data manager, they all cooked up, you know, had a malfeasance, cooked up a little conspiracy scheme. They all had to go because they misreported an act of violence to the state and perpetrated a retribution punishment against the victim to try to silence her over a star football player. I mean, this is what we're talking about. You get this wrong and you go home. There's no compensatory action that we can take. You got to go home. There's no mitigating circumstances. And so the question is, usually it's an AP. It's not smart if it's not, but the principal is ultimately responsible. And it gives you all these scenarios and how to use all the things that have to be done, how to code it all. It's long. It has all about all the paperwork and what has to be done for alternative schools. It has your sections on reporting bullying. It has your cyberbullying law. Now, I want to hit on cyberbullying. I'm keeping an eye on our time. I want to hit on cyberbullying. Let me see if I can make sure I hit it. Let's see. Bullying session law, 2009 bullying. Okay. Cyberbullying. Let's see. All right. And I may have to pull that one out separately, because you know, I won't be able to find it when I need to. I thought it was right there. I've got it though. But what I'm going to do is I'll make sure that I post the cyberbullying law. Some of these handbooks have it in them and some of them don't. But what I want to say, maybe somebody sees it. Absolutely, bus discipline has to be entered into power school. That's not even debatable. Everything that happens on your camp, it's called portal to portal. Bus stop to bus to school to bus to bus stop. That's portal to portal. That has to be reported. Let me say that again. The law is very clear. Portal to portal. That means bus stop, bus, school, and then the reverse of that, school, bus, bus stop. Any incident that occurs at the bus stop, the bus, or at school goes into power school, period. And just because it happened on the bus does not mean it's just classified as bus misbehavior. If it's a fight on the bus, it's a fight. If it's a knife, it's a weapon at school, it's a knife, it's a weapon on the bus. That's one of those things that you get caught doing that, they'll end you. That will not go well. You report what happened, and that's all in this manual. It explains that to you. We don't classify things differently because of where they occurred. That it occurred on the bus, it's still a knife, it's still a fight, it's still a rape. And so, yes, all these things go into power school, period. Now, if your district or school chooses not to, that's certainly their right. I hope they got their time in where they can go home and still get their, and still draw their retirement, because that's what we're talking about. You get called. There's not any wiggle room on this stuff. Cyberbullying, I want to pull that one out separately. There is a misconception about cyberbullying. And let me see, one more second here and see if I see it. I had it queued up earlier, but I don't see it now. All right. For some reason, there was an amendment to the cyberbullying law. Now, that cyberbullying law, contrary to popular opinion or desire, was not stricken from the books. It was not amended. It was not changed. The amended part of the cyberbullying law was if two people are engaging in a Twitter war and one starts to lose, that's not bullying. That's the only change. So cyberbullying law is it doesn't matter where it occurs. It doesn't matter. We don't have to prove that they used a school computer. I've heard schools cop out and say, well, we're not sure that they used a computer here at school. That has nothing to do with it. They could have used their own phone from home, but if it has a direct impact on the school, that negatively impacts the school, then you have to take action against cyberbullying. I would involve the police, especially if it's phone-based. That's how we found the 18-year-old that was having sex with the 12-year-old girls in northern Mecklenburg County, having them send them pics and having sex with underage girls in decent liberties. And so you better get police involved with cyberbullying. One of the students, and I hope they're with us tonight, one of the students wrote about a situation at their school where some cyberbullying was happening at home on social media. Somebody drew a picture or something, a not very flattering picture, and was bullying a kid, cyberbullying the kid. So the kid came to school the next day and beat the stuffing out of the kid that was bullying them. That would be not they're talking about, the kid that beat him up got a punishment, but the kid that got beat up should have been charged with cyberbullying to begin with. Obviously, it causes disruption in school. Somebody comes in the middle of a group of people and beats the stuffing out of the other. I suspect there was a lot that went on good in school the rest of that day. You don't think that's a disruption to the school environment? And so, again, cyberbullying says that if it doesn't matter where it happened, Doesn't matter what device they used. If it happens and it disrupts your school, then you have to take action against it. I'm going to pause again, and I'm going to go to Dr. in reverse this time, Dr. Tobias. I want you to speak to how your district handles cyberbullying, and then Dr. Massengill.
So, and my particular school is a one-to-one school, so everyone has technology. So it is something we are very cognizant about and draw a hard line with. Last year, I had a couple of girls that were sexting, and the deputy was called in right away. One of the things to remember too is don't pass that information on. So if they send it to your phone, like they tried to send it to my work phone, I was like, no, don't send that to me because that's like trafficking. If they to you too, so you don't want to receive. You want to look at it, pass it on to authorities, but you don't want to pass it on to somebody else because then you're liable. But it is a hard line that we draw with bullying, particularly with all the things that have gone on with people coming in and killing people in schools and things like that is due to bullying. So we are very careful with that.
Thank you. Dr. Massengill?
So we have several things that we use. We have a district level reporting system where students can anonymously report bullying, harassment, and potential threats of school violence. And that comes directly to school administrators, our school SRO, and district officials. And we have to respond to that if it comes in through that within a certain time frame. And depending on the type of threat determines who responds. If there's potential criminal misconduct based on general statutes, then the SRO is the primary investigator with administrator support. If it's not, then it's the vice versa. So the administrator would investigate, and the SRO would be there to assist if we needed to turn it over, if we found increased things going on that weren't initially reported. We've also now converted to the new state system for the Say Something Anonymous reporting system, which allows, eventually all systems are going to be using this. If you're not using it already, you will be in North Carolina because it's a state mandate. But the students, parents, staff members, anybody can now anonymously report if they suspect bullying, harassment, or potential violence. And those calls are triaged 24/7. So principals now have to respond to those tips pretty much anytime that we're called upon. And if law enforcement begins investigating something under the state policy now, it's the principal's responsibility to provide them with the demographic information of the student if requested under the new policy that's been adopted for this new system. So essentially you are on the clock 24/7 when it comes to that stuff now, because you're the keeper of the keys for the demographic information, even if it's criminal in nature.
That's correct. Thank you. Remind me to hit, as we close tonight, remind me to hit reasonable suspicion versus probable cause. Dr. Tobias just triggered me to think about that one. In our bullying law, places a student or school employee in actual or reasonable fear or harm for his person, damage to his or property, creates a hostile environment, substantially interfering or with impairing a student's educational performance, opportunities, or benefits. Series of deliberate or hurtful actions inflicted by one or more students. Bullying may physical, verbal, social, relational, or sexual harassment. Cyberbullying, which is use of communication technologies to intentionally harm others. That's what I'm talking about. That has not been taken out of the law, and if it substantially it creates a hostile environment or substantially interferes with students' educational or the educational environment, then it doesn't matter if it happened at school or not, or if they use school equipment or not. So that is one of those wives' tales that schools will use. Oh, that bullying, that harassment, bullying, cyberbullying law was struck. No, the Twitter war, one side losing is all that was removed from that. When they say, well, we didn't take action, we don't know where that tweet came from, it doesn't matter. Or we don't know where the student was when they sent it, or they didn't use the school's equipment to send it. Those are all cop-outs that you do not want to be trying to say that in court when you get sued. When somebody kills themselves over being cyberbullied and their parents sue you because you didn't take any action, and you go to court and say, well, I see that they were cyberbullying her, but we don't know if they were sending them to school or not. You do not want to have to go to court and say that. They might just put you in jail for saying something that dumb. And so I'm going to pick up here when we come back again at ALPs. And I wanted to show you what I was talking about earlier. Victim or offender types. You can see unidentified. We don't do this. I had a school on the third time they turned in a knife. They didn't know who the offender was. I went and said, this is how this is going to go. No longer are you going to let kids walk out of the room and turn knives over after reports so that you can claim you don't know who it is. The knives still count against you, by the way, and you're total for persistently dangerous. He said, what? But we don't know. I said, that's not that. That you pretend you don't know who had the knife has nothing to do with there was a knife on campus. And so, again, and then the state describes what misbehavior is and codes it in terms of degree of seriousness. We'll talk about that next time. And then they define what consequences that you can use. And there they are. But again, the local board decides which goes with which. State just says, this is an infraction, this is a consequence, you figure it out. All right, so let me get questions before we get too much further. All right, let's see. A bunch came in. All right. RTI, yeah. Reverse bullying, where students dislike a kid, they gang up and report the student for bullying even though they didn't. Yeah, that happens all the time. Johnson said that, especially in alternative settings. Yeah, they make stuff up because they know that it's a priority. That's why you have to do your investigation. That's why you have to do your investigation. You have to get witness statements. That's why you have to do your due diligence for due process. Okay, and then Cindy, question. What if a teacher staff member is getting cyberbullied? Same approach? Absolutely. This is for staff, yes. Cyberbullying is a big problem for staff. Report it, absolutely, it's the same thing. All right, last thing I want to cover tonight, quickly. I'll stop my share. This was in one of the responses on the discussion board this week. It might have been Jeanette was talking about, they had a kid that smelled of marijuana and the resource officer declined to search him, but the school did and said there must be a different standard. And I responded back to her, there is a different standard. A policeman has a standard of probable cause. They have to see a crime in progress or get a search warrant that they believe a crime has occurred. Schools only have to have reasonable suspicion. Smell of marijuana is reasonable suspicion to search a kid. It is not probable cause to search one. Now, they searched the kid and found a knife. Now, that's a crime. Now the SRO can get involved because they stand there and watching when the kid had the knife in his pocket. It's a crime to bring a weapon to school. That's an act of crime. Now he'll get involved and process the kid. But please remember, school administrators, your standard for conducting a search is reasonable suspicion. Smell of dope would fall in that category. Officers have to have probable cause. So sometimes when you bring a kid in, they'll stand and watch, but they won't do the search because it does not meet their legal standard. You need to understand the difference in the two. We'll cover more of that next time when we talk. Please remember that next week, y'all get to talk after I cover our weekly our weekly review of where we are. I will turn it over. You will present your PowerPoints. You will do the talking. You will make your arguments. You will try to convince me of your point of view. In this case, next week. I can't wait. I'm so excited. I can't wait for next Wednesday. Thank you for joining me tonight. I will see you all next Wednesday. Everybody be sure to show up and bring your presentation. Thank you all for joining me.
Have a great
Good
Bye.
night.
Thank you.
Thank you.